So this workshop, we're going to be looking at how to channel your inner voice and give emotions to powerful prose. And to introduce our fabulous speaker today, we have RJ. He is a New York-born autistic author of a science fiction fantasy thriller novel, Cyberwar. He's the founder of the ForgottenFiction.com magazine, and he's a contributor to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association. He currently has a bevy of creative projects on the horizon, and he lives with his wife, their daughter, a spotted dog, and an unspotted cat in northern Portugal. And I just want to mention before I hand this over to RJ and let him run ahead with this workshop, that in addition to his storytelling and creative writing skills that he's offering to us today, he will also be donating $1 from the sales of his newest book, Ants Waking, to GATE, as well as $1 to the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. And this is to benefit trans and neurodivergent communities. So we're really grateful to RJ for this support to our organization. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, RJ, and unmute myself.
Oh, thank you so much for that warm welcome, Naaman. I want to thank the entire organization of GATE and all of its members for all that you do. Truly make the world a brighter place. And I especially want to thank Naaman, Andrio, and Erica, who have worked with me to put together this creative writing workshop. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I'm very excited today. I'm very excited. I probably have too much material, so we'll see what we can get through. The prospect of potentially helping an author, it's just something that is it's been integral to my career. So very excited to do this today. And I especially want to thank everyone that's here. Your authors, and you've taken the time from your valuable lives to attend here, and I feel humbled and privileged to be able to speak with you on writing today. I'm going to be focusing on my favorite area of writing, which is fiction. So I read and write everything. I have a reading and writing problem. But fiction is really where my heart lies. And to write exceptional fiction and stories, there are only two prerequisites, and that's to read in every way that you can and to put the pen to the page and write on the page. As I said, I love to read. I read everything that I can get my hands on. If I'm really trying to pay attention to some research I'm doing online, I'll print that out. I'll take notes by hand, which helps my memory and my creative processes. But I read history. I read a ton of fiction. I love to write, especially speculative literature. And so I read a lot of science fiction, fantasy, horror. But I read literary fiction and autobiographies and everything in between. And that kind of helps me as I love to write everything as well. So, my first publication was for a New York newspaper, Newsday, and I was able to quickly get a job as a columnist for the Examiner. And I've written a lot of nonfiction, which in some ways helps me keep my fiction honest and more concise, if you will, at times. But I also love to write poetry. I find that to be the most freeing writing endeavor, especially when you can completely ignore the rules of grammar and, write something down that's meaningful and powerful and not even have punctuation in it, which is especially refreshing if you're writing a lot of fiction and you need to step away for a minute. The beauty in writing fiction, in my opinion, is that anything and everything that you read, that you write, that you do can and will influence your storytelling, whether consciously or subliminally. Now, I read Jack Kerouac's On the Road at age 19. I was so inspired that I traveled from New York across the United States to California in an old, disheveled 1977 Dodge van that was actively breaking down with no brakes, no heat, and that was in the heart of the winter. Um, it was some of the hardest things I've ever gone through in my life, but also some of the most rewarding. I sang Knocking on Heaven's Door while I played guitar at rest stops in Tahoe and Sacramento for gas money as I drove on to eventually live just outside of San Francisco for a while. Once there, I started to write my first novel and everything changed. I'd always been writing, was making my own comic books about age 4 or 5, but when I started to write my first novel, and so you know, it was terrible. I mean, I would not let any of you read this. It was very, very bad, but I did it and I completed the process, and it immediately paid rewards in what I wrote thereafter. Um, this is how art is made. It's made through our experiences, you know, as people, and it's also made um, from the art that we consume. And so now I'm in this constant race against time because there's not enough hours in the day for the amount of art that's out there that I want to take in. We live our lives as best we can manage, and we become enamored with art. And then when you fuse those two, it really leads to you know, our own art that becomes something far greater than, in my opinion, than any formal writing education or art education could provide. Um, to make art, all you need to do is enjoy art and to practice art. That's all you need. So this, I feel, is very important for storytelling in particular because the best storytelling involves the strongest voices. The narrators and the characters that we really love are the ones that we hear the loudest. It's my hope to embark useful tips to help further empower you on your writing journey. If you're just starting out or if you are a published veteran, I hope that this will be useful because I have found throughout my life that specific pieces of advice, whether in a gentle word, an instruction, a trade secret, a guide, struck me as if with a blow and greatly enhanced my writing. And so I'm going to work to give you something today that provides a meaningful aid, a wrinkle, a perspective, something that will be this little tweak that helps infuse your storytelling and your writing. I would recommend, however, that you skip the step where you're driving a death trap thousands of miles across a country. That's not necessary, nor is it recommended. You don't have to court danger like a fool like I did, but uh, I mean, I guess on the upside, I was inspired, right? So I like to go with inspiration for sure, but there are better ways to do that. Today, I want to charge you all with making art and make art and be loud. I want you to keep that in mind because the voice, whether it's your narrator, your character, your prose, your voice is going to come through in your writing voice, and this is going to be very effective in fiction and storytelling. And to me, it's always elusive. What's the definition of this thing called style, right? So I leaned on uh, some great authors to for their definition of style, because to me it's so very arbitrary, but it's really a kind of a lot of things convalescing, and I think at the heart of it is our inner voice in the writing. So let's channel that inner voice into effervescent style. Now I'm gonna share my screen here real quick and just pull up a couple of slides that I have here for you. So I find for me to be engaged, and I am often a visual learner, but if I'm in a situation where, someone is speaking, I tend to prefer to be engaged with them. I have just a handful of slides to kind of be my guide to stay on track and your guide to help us, but I'm not going to overwhelm you with a ton of things to look at. I do have a couple of fun things that we'll go through, but you don't have to be glued to this background here. But we're gonna work off of some of what I feel are the most important aspects to really bolster and boost that storytelling voice. Four of the key elements are world building, character creation, metaphor, and conflict, which can be at the heart of all three of the things that are preceding it. But it also can serve for its own purposes. So it's important to note that we are all the narrator in our own story. It is our voice, which can literally be the inner monologue, or it can be the five senses as experienced by our characters. It is our personal imprint, this voice on the words and the language we put down. That's what I feel becomes kind of the essence of style, and in our unique style going out there, our strong storytelling voice. The more we read, these are our courses of study. The more that we recognize, the more that we read allows us to recognize more others, more writers' use of language and their storytelling elements. You will pick these out. Some of the things we discussed today, if you haven't been noticing them in stories before, you will watch a movie or you will read a book and you will note some of these things, some of these devices that they've used. And then you'll start to see how different authors use the same device, but it's completely different. And this is because of their unique style. We can examine our own works, and then we can make conscious decisions to use the language in ways wholly unique to how we feel. So it's one thing comes after the other, and then even though I've known how to do this for quite a while, I'm still going over exactly what I'm telling you now to remind myself and to kind of get my head into this mode. But when we can enjoy a work of art, enjoy something that entertains us, and we can pick out some of the things that are being achieved in that and why it works, we can then immediately look to our own art and our own writing and determine, make conscious decisions in ways wholly unique to how we feel, to put our impetus on not just on the words themselves, of course, but and also on how these words are displayed by the character, by the narrator. This is going to make that style and this story completely unique to us. The first audience member that you should have when you write anything should be to yourself. We'll talk a little bit more on that later because there's a fun author that mentions that, but absolutely you should think of yourself as the reader of one. When you write, put it down and say, oh wow, yes, okay, this is resonating with me. Now for me, there are authors that do things a million different ways, and I don't think any of them are wrong, but some are much more formulaic or do things quite differently than I do. For me, this conscious use of language and tweaking it to my own feelings is a very organic process. So I would suggest to all of you, do not force it. Do not force this process. Don't stop thinking about it, no matter how much you write. But the more that you read and the more that you just live out there in the world, we all evolve and our writing will evolve with us. And that's why I feel I constantly have to read more and study more. And I always will, because I'm trying to have my writing evolve with me. And it will. And some of that is almost an unconscious thing. But it's quite fun when you can start to consciously say, oh yeah, this is absolutely a human versus self scenario, and this plays out really well in this movie. And I was thinking of doing something like this in my writing, but then you're going to have your own whole, your own unique take on that. No matter the genre or length of your story, you can harness style in a way to make your words be remembered. It is the style and our differentiations that really make this voice louder on the page. Let's see, at the conclusion of the workshop, we're going to have a 30-minute Q&A, as Naaman spoke to. I'm just going to try to act as your guide today on a short journey to take a look at some renowned authors' methods that I adore and respect, that have forever changed me. And I'm going to impart some of my own interpretations of them. We'll look at some of their writing. We'll look at some of their rules on writing. Some of these you may have heard of, some of these you haven't, but the bulk of them would be Edgar Allan Poe, Haley Piper, Martha Wells, Kurt Vonnegut Jr., Ray Bradbury, Stephen King, and last but certainly not least, Chuck Palahniuk. Yeah, they are all remarkable authors, and the things that they have achieved on the page, we could forever look over and discuss. But there are some things that have absolutely helped me, even very recently. I only came across Martha Wells very recently. Now I will devour everything that she writes ever and forever. There are things that I have taken that she has done that absolutely blew my mind and added a whole other set of things that I wanted to add and put into my stories. So let's get started with there are some great rules that I feel these really never cease to amaze me, because when writing, we can all kind of go off on a tangent or just feel like it's not working. This is a normal part of the process. These are some extremely short rules that I continue to find very helpful. And I will say this a number of times today, but rules are meant to be broken. I am not an advocate of we have to do this way. It just that doesn't make any sense to me. But I'm gonna share some with you that, as I said, are extremely helpful. Just speaking to style, I mean, we could spend a 6-month semester or more on studying style and storytelling. And I love critiquing others and my own. But as I said, I do feel it's one of the most organic parts in the writing process. So, less thought and more intuition, I think, often serves better. And what also comes into play is just kind of instinct, even if you've never, you've only, let's say, written a short story, you've only thought about writing a short story, or you've written a short story and you've never written a longer work, you've thought about writing a novel. Oh, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Train of thought here. Yes. So the biggest part is overcoming that blank page. The biggest part is continuing on when it's not working, because it is almost automatic. It is almost instinctual. We're going to keep writing, and you will write through that difficult part. You will find then that you look at something if you wait a day, you wait till the next day, you look at something in 2 weeks, you put it down for a couple of weeks, you look at it through completely different eyes. Something that you thought was terrible, you may love, and something that you thought was really good, consequently, you may say, no, this is not working. That's a part of the process. It's a very, very, as I've said, I think very, very, very organic process. And I love the simplicity of just kind of going with that. Now, that said, certain rules or things are kind of very helpful guardrails, if you will. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite authors. I'm going to try to convey a message from him posthumously, in the hope that the simplicity and the enormous importance of style and the power of it can come across in a humorous way. Kurt Vonnegut Jr., if you're not familiar with him, he wrote Slaughterhouse-Five, one of Time's 50 greatest novels of all time. I just reread that. I reread it every few years. He wrote a short story called Harrison Bergeron, forever one of my biggest influences, and a ton of other things. But most importantly, he's helped me with my literary life and with what I'm about to share with you. He steals my heart here as he skewers journalism in his day. He really was not a fan of journalism in his day. And I quote, he gives it an admonition against the impersonal sterility of journalistic reporting, something particularly important amidst contemporary debates about how personal the writerly persona should be, and a meditation on the single most important element of style. Newspaper reporters and technical writers are trained to reveal almost nothing about themselves in their writing. This makes them freaks in the world of writers, since almost all of the other ink-stained wretches in that world reveal a lot about themselves to readers. We call these revelations accidental and intentional elements of style. These revelations tell us as readers what sort of person it is with whom we are spending time. Does the writer sound ignorant or informed, stupid or bright, crooked or honest, humorless or playful, and on and on? Why should you examine your writing style with the idea of improving it? Do so as a mark of respect for your readers, whatever you're writing. If you scribble your thoughts any which way, your reader will surely feel that you care nothing about them. They will mark you down as an egomaniac or a chowderhead, or worse, they will stop reading you. The most damning revelation you can make about yourself is that you do not know what it is interesting and what is not interesting. Don't you yourself like or dislike writers mainly for what they choose to show or make you think about? Did you ever admire an empty-headed writer for their quote unquote mastery of the language? No. So your own winning style must begin with ideas in your head. So I should have prefaced this. That was his little rant right before his 8 rules. So, but he, now it's true in if you're writing for a newspaper, you're supposed to kind of dissolve almost all sense of style. But you really don't, you don't even have to then if you do it well. And Kurt Vonnegut knew that. So Mr. Vonnegut, how do we do this? How do we do this? You say it begins with ideas in our head. How do we do this? Thankfully, he gives us two sets of rules of 8. And I'm sorry to be confusing, but the man loved 8. I don't know why, but we have to love him for it. The first set of 8 rules, I'm just going to, and these are all very short, and we'll get into some more deeper discussion, but I'm gonna give you a little bit of my annotations on these as I've read these over and over. Rule number 1, find a subject you care about. Find a subject you care about. You can elaborate and say which in your heart you feel others should care about. It is this genuine caring and not your games with language, which will be the most compelling and seductive element in your style. So I'm going to read that back again. It is this genuine caring and not your games with language, Vonnegut tells us, which will be the most compelling element in our style. He's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. So there are so many rules to writing, and there are so many, there's so much writing on writing, and I write a good deal of that myself. But the most important thing, write about something that you care about. It can be anything that you care about for any reason. But if you care about it, I've fallen in love with a little Iberian wall lizard, about 3 or 4 inches long, that my dog almost ate. I love that thing. And when I write, you will know that I love it, but you too will also get you will get a sense of genuine caring, and that's vital. You cannot force that. You cannot force that. I know, as Kurt Vonnegut bluntly says, a petition to the mayor about a pothole in front of your house will do. So if you really like petitions and you really don't like potholes, you could write something, so long as you care about it, it will come through. Now he has one that I forever remind myself of. Rule number 2, do not ramble though. I won't ramble on about that. I'm an old time rambler. Number 3, keep it simple. This is some of the best advice I've ever gotten for writing. Vonnegut says, as for your use of language, remember that 2 great masters of language, William Shakespeare and James Joyce, wrote sentences which were almost childlike when their subjects were most profound. To be or not to be, asks Shakespeare's Hamlet. The longest word is 3 letters long. Joyce, when he was frisky, could put together a sentence as intricate and as glittering as a necklace for Cleopatra. Could put together a sentence as intricate and as glittering as a necklace for Cleopatra. But my favorite sentence in his short story, Eveline, is just this: she was tired. At that point in the story, no other words could break the heart of a reader as those 3 words do. To elaborate on Mr. Vonnegut, I love to write a sentence full of imagery and immense in and of itself. A paragraph of a sentence, if you will. But because of this rule, I have found that even the authors that can go on and on, as Shakespeare often does, with long sentences and descriptions themselves, there is a balance there. And you get to make the balance what it is, but there is a balance. And so if you can keep a good amount of this simple. For me, depending on what I'm writing, if I'm writing something that's like a straight thriller, I have very short, concise sentences and very short descriptions throughout the entire work, book, short story, whatever. More often, I'm writing science fiction and fantasy. I'm going on and on and on with some beautiful descriptions and imagery. But then I like to balance this with a sentence just like she was tired. A sentence like I fell. This interspersing of simple language, simple sentences, being concise. It's something that there's a whole school of training called the art of minimalism, which is something that Chuck Palahniuk studied from his favorite mentor and teacher, Tom Spanbauer. But it works very well if you keep things simple and if you keep them concise. You can go beyond that, as I say, but having some kind of balance, you will find that as Vonnegut points out, that there are times that you're reading something and it is just that little 2 or 3 word sentence that just you burst into tears. It's truly extraordinary to be or not to be. Rule number 4, have the guts to cut. And this is one I really don't like personally. I very much don't like this because I hate cutting away any of my work. I put work and time and effort into that, and I hated it at one point and I loved it at another. But he's right. And Kurt Vonnegut says, it may be that to you two you're capable of making necklaces for Cleopatra, so to speak. But your eloquence should be the servant of the ideas in your head. Your rule might be this, he says. If a sentence, no matter how excellent, does not illuminate your subject in some new and useful way, scratch it out. I put this in bold here for myself. Your sentence needs to be illuminating your subject in a new and useful way. If having a necklaces for Cleopatra sentence and lots of beautiful description does that, and you can't make it do that, I love to do this, by all means. But if it is there in and of itself and it is not assisting your character on the page, it probably can be cut. Sometimes you write something and you cut half of it. Sometimes you write a novel and you cut just a couple of pages. But you have to almost be ruthless about it. You have to, as he says, have the guts to cut. This is something we've already spoken to, and it makes perfect sense for it to be here. But rule number 5 is sound like yourself. The writing style which is most natural for you is bound to echo the speech you heard as a child. He says a couple of really interesting things here. One, I didn't recall this. So as I was doing this rereading this as a refresher for today, this kind of blew my mind. So novelist Joseph Conrad, old novelist, but he wrote these pivotal works that have influenced us, from Heart of Darkness, which became Apocalypse Now, is probably his most famous. English was his third language. And Vonnegut says it was no doubt heavily influenced by his first language, which was Polish. And lucky indeed is the writer, Vonnegut says, who has grown up in Ireland, for the English spoken there is so amusing and so musical to hear. And then Vonnegut says, I myself grew up in Indianapolis, where common speech sounds like a bandsaw cutting galvanized tin. and which employs a vocabulary as unornamental as a monkey wrench. But, and this is what's really, really so important here. He says he trusts his writing the most, and others seem to trust it the most when it sounds like a person from Indianapolis. It's remarkable. I try to, having read so many of Vonnegut's works, I try to picture him with a voice that is anything other than Kilgore Trout from Indianapolis, and I can't do it. I can't do it. Now, it doesn't have to be literal, as in this is where you came from and this is what your voice is. But you're going to discover, if you haven't, you may have discovered already. If not, you will discover that you have kind of this, you have a literary voice, and that becomes the basis for your style, for your characters. People will recognize and pick up on that, and they will feel a sense of trust in you, and therefore they will empathize with you, and they will be able to feel what you feel. Vonnegut, number 6, say what you mean to say. Readers want our pages to look very much like pages they have seen before. Why? This is because they have the toughest job. They have to read and to comprehend. Here he's talking about, and then this also goes into rule number 7, pity the readers. He's really just talking about not pulling in E.E. Cummings in fiction prose. E.E. Cummings was famous for not even capitalizing his name when he wrote it or using any punctuation, and much of his poetry is very visual. It's like a Picasso piece in words, often jumbled up all over. I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. I had a creative writing professor who handed us a poem he had written, and the words were in the shape of a cigarette smoking, smoke trailing out. I wish I still had it, because if I did, I would show it to you. But that's E.E. Cummings. Now, that is, it's fantastic for what it is, but that is not good in fiction storytelling, because you will lose the readers. And I used to get in trouble with this all the time, and I've had lots of people screaming at me, and now I've reread Vonnegut screaming at me in my head so much that I've finally adhered to, okay, I can't, nobody's gonna get it but me. It's too confusing. Poetry, you have to take a pickaxe to and make an archaeological excavation of a poem, which is part of its beauty. And it always has mystery to it. But somebody that's reading a piece of fiction, they're probably not going to go to those lengths. So absolutely pity the reader, say what you mean to say, do it in a way that is not too abstract. Not too abstract. So as much as I like to break rules, use the periods in the sentences where the periods usually go, unless there's a good purpose that's clear to you and the reader, at which point, hey, by all means, go ahead, move it around. Vonnegut's last rule is kind of, it's kind of cheating. It's not really a rule. It's just called, for detailed advice for a discussion of literary style in a narrower sense, a more technical sense, I commend your attention to The Elements of Style by William Strunk Jr. and E.B. White. E.B. White wrote Charlotte's Web. Now, when I was 19, starting my first novel, I got a job landscaping with a retired English teacher just outside of San Francisco. And when he heard that I was writing a novel, he said, "Oh, you don't have a computer?" "No, I don't have a computer with me. Here, you can use my computer." And then he imparted on me this, and I'm going to see if I can adjust the screen sharing here. Just bear with me 1 second. I'm delighted to have this. Okay, there's my face. All right. This is my copy. Try to get as close as I can. Nope. Of the Elements of Style. This book is maybe 100 pages long. A little bit more. No, actually, a little bit less. This could have replaced every textbook that I had in English classes from the age of 5 to 25. Any textbook on technical use of the language English could be replaced, in my opinion, by this book. So this book is, you specifically say, because English is a fun language, right? I'm having a hell of a time learning my third language, which is Portuguese, as I'm in Portugal, and but it's such a beautiful language. Every language has its own rules, has its own vocabulary. English is, I pity anyone that did not grow up learning English and you know, as a primary language, because much of it doesn't make sense. It's really a lot of nonsensical things thrown in there, and then every so many, you know, I studied this, and you know, every time somebody won a big battle a few hundred years ago, they imparted their own wisdom on the English language, and it evolved and greatly changed. And then the United States of America said, well, we don't want our English to be like those colonists in England. We're going to change it again. So, you know, there are all of these colloquialisms and unique odd phrasings, you know, especially in the US where I grew up, you know, why do you park on a driveway and drive on a parkway? I don't know. I don't know. But this book attains all of that wisdom that when you're writing and you say, oh, I want to use ludicrous and I want to do it in the right way. This book will give you, it has a fantastic index. You know, when you're questioning yourself as to the use of the word they, which can be spelled in, you know, a few different ways and used in many more different ways, or the use of a semicolon. I keep this in my desk. I've kept this in my desk as I've lived in New York. And of course, I had it with me in California. I have it with me in Portugal. I keep it in my writing desk wherever I am, close to me. And I will absolutely find times where I just don't know, you know, I think I'm misusing a word. And I just look up that word, and sure enough, here's a chapter, misused words and expressions. And I find how people are saying it, how it's supposed to be written. And then I decide, do I want it to sound like the way that they're saying it, even though it's not correct grammatically, or do I want the correct grammatic thing there because it's not a part of the voice of the character or the sentence, the words that we're putting down. Extremely useful. So I highly recommend um, this one. This one is waterlogged. Okay, this was bought at a used bookstore in Santa Rosa. We got some great water stains. I absolutely love it, and I hope that it never, at this point, I don't think it will fall apart. I think it will stand the test of time. Um, but I highly agree with Mr. Vonnegut there. Now, there were a couple of just a few pieces of materials that went out with this Zoom invite. One of those is the short 8 rules on here we are. Mr. Vonnegut's 8 rules on the short story, which also applies, I think, to the long story. I'm going to run through these because I don't want to just keep reading rules, but these things have been foundational to my writing. I feel that when I was probably in my 20s, when I had written a few novels, that I paid closer attention to these rules and to some advice from some mentors and some teachers, and then I forever turned a corner. Vonnegut says, don't waste your reader's time. Being on point is important. You can write an 800-page epic fantasy story, but make sure it's essential to enjoy. Excuse me, what's in there is essential for the reader to enjoy the work. If the reader, and this is me talking, not Kurt, if the reader is forced to experience a character washing pots repeatedly for more than one chapter, ask yourself, is this essential and or entertaining for the reading? I say that for a very specific reason. We'll get to that well, right here, actually. Rule number 2, Vonnegut says, give the reader a character to root for. Now, the character that I'm speaking about, scrubbing pots, is Arya Stark from George R.R. Martin's the series. The first book was Game of Thrones. The third book in his series, for A Song of Wind and Fire, is called A Storm of Swords. Now, even the best and most successful authors will make mistakes. In this case, I don't think he made a mistake so much as his editor made a mistake, or as has happened with some of the biggest and most famous and well-to-do authors. Sometimes the editors get a little scared, I think, to say, you know, George, you've had 4 chapters of Arya scrubbing pots, and this book is 900 pages long. It could be 850 and have a lot less pots. But that's my opinion. Some people hate it when I bring that up because they love him so much, and I love him too. I mean, he's a absolutely brilliant author. But that still drives me nuts. Arya scrubbing pots. Oh man, I gotta. So, but you know, the be on point. This is important. If you have the torturous. If it's torturous for the reader and it's torturous for the character, and they get it. They get it. Do it once, maybe do it twice. Now, in giving the reader a character to root for, of course, you're rooting for Arya to escape the Lannisters and to stop scrubbing pots. That's the only means to that end, right? So give the reader a character to root for. Sometimes it's the villain, quote unquote. Sometimes it's the antagonist. Sometimes there's no protagonist. There's only a really messed up anti-hero. Make there be a reason to root for them. And sometimes when you're really good, you're going to have this in your head and you're going to make these characters that you really love, and then you're going to find that people they're not loving what you thought of, who you thought of as were the main characters, but they were rooting for some of the other characters so much that was who they loved. And that's always a great surprise to hear. Keep that in mind. It works extremely well. Let's see. Rule number 3. This is one of his most famous quotes. You may have heard this. Every character should want something, even if it's only a glass of water. I want some coffee. We're going to do that. Every character should want something. Otherwise, why are they there and not someone else in your story that has something that they want to achieve or something they want to attain? This is vital. Let's see. Arya, of course, wants to escape those damn pots. All right. Number 4, every sentence must either reveal character or advance the action. So these 8 rules are almost, I find, like his own kind of concise annotations on the rules before to some degree, but in a very concise manner. So you could just, this is like a great list you could just hang up on your wall or your desktop, you know, and scroll through them really quickly. Every sentence must reveal character or advance the action. Otherwise, cross out the sentence, for it must have purpose. Could not agree more. If the book is 800 pages and every sentence has a purpose, and Game of Thrones did, I mean, that was a great example. The first, I mean, my goodness, yes. You know, make sure that those sentences, that those characters want something. Every person alive wants something, even if it's the glass of water. Let's see. Number 5, start as close to the end as possible. Now, this is an interesting one, and this is one that I'm still not sure I agree with, but that's okay. Start as close to the end as possible. I totally get it. So stories, we're watching a mini series, a movie, we're reading a book. They're almost always placed as close as possible to the conflict, timing wise. And that's simply because it makes it more dramatic. Okay, so this is why backstory is backstory. That early time usually does not need to be fully fleshed out for you to get what's important from it, but to then move really close to where things get really good, right? So and what he's speaking to is, if you're essentially, it's almost like you're starting the last section, the last few chapters when you're starting the first chapter. Rule number 6. This is fantastic. Be a sadist. Make awful things happen to your character. Let's see what they're made of. It's true. It's true. I mean, every character, like every person, is alive and is going to go through their own traumas, and readers want to see and know what they've gone through because that will show them what they're made of. It is our actions that speak for us, and it is no different here. Now, George R. R. Martin's another good example. He has lots of characters, and he's very mean to them, extremely mean to them, and some of them that you would never think might start losing their heads. He's absolutely a sadist when it comes to his characters. Awful things happen to them, and man, let me tell you, you root for every single one of them, and you may cry depending on how it goes, or laugh, or both. Rule number 7, write to please just one person. I alluded to this earlier, but it's true. There's an audience of one. If you want to write to you have a kitty here, or there's a woodchuck you go on your walks and you see, and you want to read to them, by all means, but really, really think of an audience of one person. Speak to that person. Everyone else will get it, but that one person has to get it first. The last rule he has is give your readers as much information as possible as soon as possible. This is a really cool one. This is a really important and fun rule to implement. Give your readers as much info as possible as soon as possible. I'm going to show you, in just a minute here, some of the best ways to form a character are in the very first moments that we see the character on the page. Might be a sentence, might be a paragraph, might be a section of a couple paragraphs. But if you can take your sense of style and take what you want this character to represent and get that down as much as you can in a small space, it is powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. And what often happens with me, because I love to improvise, right? There are times I'm writing a book right now. I had no intention of writing this book. Usually I have an idea for a book. I start to research the book. No, none of that. None of that. This was pure feeling. And then I wrote down a line and I said, oh, geez, yeah, okay. I have to explore this. One line. I wrote one line. That happens to me all the time. What I've noticed is that the authors that I love, they will do this in every book. And it's powerful, powerful stuff. I mean, Hamlet's a great example. To be or not to be defines the character of Hamlet. Such a in that space, it's incredible. All right, so let's gonna jump back here. I'm trying not to ramble, trying to stay on point a bit. I appreciate you all coming along for the ride with me. Let's see, screen sharing. Oh yes, world building. So the first key element I want to address is world building, which is so much fun. I mean, just you're telling your story. Well, whatever that story is, even if you're just explaining some crazy experience you had, going to the supermarket to get some food or something, and some kind of interaction. This is your story, which means you're building for the listener, who is the reader. You're building a world. You're building a world. The beauty of fiction is it does not have to be an entirely truthful world. It can be what we want it to be. And we can impart, what we want to impart on it. World building has subgenres that are very important. The conflict is one. We're going to, like I said, that's so important. We'll jump back to that later. Human versus nature, human versus self. That's those are really some of the bare bones conflicts, right? Now the setting. Where is the story taking place? At what time is it taking place? Setting is it's pivotal. It may seem like it's just common sense, it's where the story is taking place, the time, but I like to use this, and I often make setting a character in my works. So in my book Ants Waking, it's a novella. It's what's called magical realism. I hate genres, but that's kind of what it's put in, because it takes place in a real city, Cambridge in Massachusetts, in the heart of Boston, but it's a magical city. And so I have the real elements of the city and the real history mixed up with everything else that I wanted to bring in that is not at all really there. And you have to go there if you want to see what's there and what isn't there. Cambridge is a character in this story. Cambridge has its own magical beings, has its own essence. And at this time in the winter, if you go to the winter in Boston and it's post snow, which could be any time really, you're going to see 4, 5, 6 foot piles of snow on the sidewalk because there's nowhere else to put it, and you're going through a maze of that and the buildings. I have the snow and the houses and the trees all doing very specific things in the story. Name and mention my novel Cyberwar. Cyberwar, I wanted to have a film noir setting that made you feel cold in your bones. So there is rain and more rain and freezing rain constantly going on in the story, and it gets involved. Tires slipping, people slipping. It's active in the story. You can make your setting speak for itself, do things for itself, and be an important character in the story. And especially now that I know that I'm autistic, which is something I didn't know until fairly recently, it makes a lot more sense to me. But I often focus on all 5 senses: smell, taste, hearing, touch, sight, of course. Geez, forget sight. But I find you can have the setting impose on your characters on all of these senses. And if you bring these senses in one at a time, I would bet that your reader is going to get a much better handle on that setting based on they're getting feelings. They know how cold this rain is and how cold it must be outside. Let's see. Now, the world of speculative fiction and fantasy, it gets into world building, goes down also into a kind of subgenre of what kind of world is it in? And then there are specific terms for that. Really, I like to break it down into there are, I mean, for me, I just keep it simpler with it's either a real world scenario, which having a fairly accurate history of Cambridge, for instance, kept it more real world for me in my mind for that story. Or it's a fantastical setting, and this is where you have um, the high fantasy. High fantasy is a completely alternate realm. That would be the Lord of the Rings. Um, an epic fantasy would be something like His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, where you have these vast worlds with complex political systems that are completely fictional, completely fictional. There's alternate history world building where you decide, um, Stephen King had a book, 11/22/63. What happened if you could go back in time to prevent John F. Kennedy, the president at the time, from being assassinated? How would the world change? That's an alternate history world he created. That's an idea he had in the 70s, and he felt he was not an accomplished enough writer to do the proper research on it, and he waited decades to write it. It's one of his best, in my opinion, 11/22/63. He waited decades to write it. It's one of the most difficult things he ever wrote because it's largely a historical novel, which is another type of of novel. You can write a historical novel where you're taking the history and then real history, and you're bringing that into your prose, and then your characters are doing fictional things. Alternate histories kind of a merge of both of that. There's some great alternate history. Philip K. Dick, The Man in the High Castle, one of my new favorite authors, R.F. Kuang. She wrote a series called The Poppy War. She also wrote a book called Babel. Both of those are like alternate history. They're heavily rooted in real history, but then there's a drastic turn that's changing what we've seen here in our world today. And then there's two more. There's urban fantasy, which is really just you have a magical world, but that can be in cities and it has magical societies. And then there's a portal fantasy. And a portal fantasy is one of the oldest types of storytelling that we know of. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. That's a portal story. You're going through a door to another place that is not this world that we're standing in now. Those are really the kind of genres, subgenres, types of world. When I start out, I really don't focus on that, but you can see where if you had a good idea about an alternate history, or you had a good idea about something that's totally its own thing, like The Lord of the Rings, that it would be helpful in starting from one of those starting points. So I think it's definitely good to kind of be aware of them. My favorite part of world building, though, as I alluded to before, is the openings. The openings, it's well, it's so funny because my the first thing my partner does when she reads a book is she reads the last page. Forever, we had to stop talking about it. I would be divorced right now. Forever eludes me. But for me, I most look forward to the first page, and oftentimes, not always, sometimes I read a first page and I love what I'm reading, and then the book just doesn't pan out for me. But most of the time, I find if I'm blown away with the opening of this book, that I'm going to fall in love with this book. And it uses most of Vonnegut's rules. It uses, I think, most of the best things that we can do as storytellers, where we really get a lot of ourselves and what we're trying to project onto the page in a short space. And I feel it's more important in today's day and age because of shrinking attention span. Uh, I mean, I could blame a lot of things. I'm not going to blame anything, but there is shrinking attention span, and so, and for a lot of reasons, people are a lot less likely now to give a book 200 pages to get past the opening, like you would in a Charles Dickens book. Now, Charles Dickens was paid by the word, so he loved those long openings. And people of the day did not even have radio when that book came out. So yeah, they were fine with it. But in today's day and age, getting a lot across and in a concise and powerful manner and a powerful opening, I think will it will just go out to the entire story. That this is really as I said, it's my favorite part of world building, but I do think it's one of the most important parts of writing. Um, they're so vital and oftentimes underutilized. I don't close a book that the first page is just okay or whatever. I don't judge a book by the first page. But when it's really good, oftentimes I feel it's just there's so much to do, right? There's so much you want to say, and you want to get your character on that page and running around, that I just think it's maybe overlooked, and I think it's underutilized as using that very, very start and opening. This is where you set the stage for your main characters, for the type of world, for the conflict that they're going to be in, for your style and whimsy, for how you're going to project your voice, your narrator's voice, how your style is going to dictate how your sentences are read throughout. It's going to have underlying and overwhelming feelings associated with your story, your truth, your setting, and all of those things can be coming out in the first sentence, in the first paragraph. And you can do so in a succinct and direct method, using the barest amount of space possible. I'm a big fan of Art Spiegelman, and Art Spiegelman is the author of Mouse and a ton of different comics. And he said the best advice he ever got making comics was from his father, who said, you want to try to get as many things as you can into as small a space as possible. And that forever changed him. Similar with the opening. It's not just in fiction either. In journalism, they call it the hook. You want to make something compelling that immediately is addressing what you're going to talk about, but also grabs the reader. And then even in academia with nonfiction works, you have the thesis, doing a similar thing. So some of my all-time favorite opening lines here convey some really fun things, I think. One that I know by heart, and one that I just started rereading a couple of days ago. I'm on my annual Hobbit into the Lord of the Rings reread. I've done this every year for probably 30 years at least. The Hobbit begins thus: in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit, not a nasty, dirty, wet hole, filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. Now, I know many people that love The Lord of the Rings, and they hate The Hobbit because The Hobbit's a children's book. The Hobbit is a very elaborate fairy tale. And the professor, as he is called, the professor wanted to tell you in one was it one sentence? Two sentences, one paragraph, that this is a fairy tale, that you've never heard of a hobbit. Remember, that's about 100 years ago. They wouldn't have heard of a hobbit, trust me. You've never heard of a hobbit, so what is that? And then why is the hobbit living in a hole? And then you hear a hole, you get all of these different images, and he dispels most of those images by telling you what it's not and telling you that it's comfortable. This is the voice, the style that he carries through the entire book, which is why part of why I love it so much. I don't care that it's a children's book. I don't care that it's a fairy tale. It's a great story with compelling language and an uplifting voice throughout. The Lord of the Rings gets heavy. It's a much heavier tale, and of course, I love that every bit as much. But this is really something, and then he's achieving that, like I said, with 2 sentences. It's, you know, it's lyrical. You got to have the fairy tale prose, something totally new in The Hobbit. You can make something like that with a sentence or two. The next one, I think, is probably the best opening line ever written. And this is not one anyone agrees with me on, but that's okay. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. This is Stephen King's, what he called his life's work, his life's opus, the Dark Tower series, his ode to J.R.R. Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings. He brings in lots of his other works. It is not a work of horror. And that sentence, what could be more thrilling, ominous, enthralling in one short sentence? The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. Now, this has he definitely had a man crush on Clint Eastwood and the Westerns of the time. And this will continue to have throughout 7 long books and thousands of pages, a heavy Western cowboy motif. He sets that stage beautifully, but you're also in an otherworldly desert. There's a man in black robes that's going to wind up being this evil kind of wizard. And gunslinger, I don't really know quite what that's about, but you're gonna find out. That's your protagonist, who's a very flawed protagonist. The setting, the main characters, that sentence, I'm so curious how long it took him to just write that one sentence. Um,
Okay, I don't want to interrupt you mid-flow, but I just wanted to just draw attention to the time. So we're just coming up on 20 past. I'm going to suggest if you would like that we carry this your workshop on until a quarter to, and then we
I
have 15 minutes for Q&A. Does that sound okay?
I think that'd be fantastic. Yeah, I
Okay.
didn't think you read it to yourself, but I think I read more quickly to myself.
Sorry for interrupting. Please carry on.
No. Thank you, Naaman. That's very good. Let's see. Going to give you a couple of more openers. All of these are books that I now reread. I mean, not all like The Lord of the Rings every year, but I reread these books because one, for the most part, I enjoy them, but two, they instruct me. I continue to reread them and get new thoughts and ideas for my fiction. Storytelling it's just there's so many facets to it, right? But like I said, for me, it's very much about feeling, and it's kind of that organic process. I'm going to be let's see, going to be a little bit briefer with a couple of these, but so 2 of the more famous ones you may have heard, you may not have heard, but also 2 of my favorite books. One being 1984. That line is, "It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13." And when he says that, he's meaning clocks, you know, winding around. There's only the 12 numbers on there, so there is no 13 to strike. He's not talking about 1300. He's talking about a world where everything is wrong. It is distorted. Yet the protagonist says this in a way as if it is truth to them. It's a cold day in April, depending on where you are. That could be likely or unlikely. But the clocks are striking 13. They're not turning 13. They're striking 13. He's speaking to the propaganda of Ingsoc, the country and institution there that the reader will come to know about. It's even a little distressing. You know, this is a anxious ridden character here. in just one sentence. Absolutely love it. Another one of my favorites, and another author that is worth devouring everything that they have, Ray Bradbury, from Fahrenheit 451. It was a pleasure to burn. Now, this is so good for a lot of reasons, right? I'm rubbing my hands together, thinking back to when I was a teenager and I first heard this, and I'd love to play with fire. Whereas nowadays, they try not to let me light a candle because they worry I'll burn my eyebrows off. It was a pleasure to burn. This, I feel, is speaking to truth in ugliness. People that love to burn, known as pyromaniacs, they admit that they love to burn things. But as readers, you damn well better believe we want to know why somebody wants to burn things, even if we don't want to burn them ourselves. So there's a lot of interest there. But I do feel that, as well as the intrigue, it's speaking to truth and ugliness. What do I mean by that? I'm not going to spoil the book for you, but the first sentence is uttered by the main character, Guy Montag, and he is a fireman in a world where the firemen set fire to the books. I mean, I don't know, and unfortunately I never got to meet Ray Bradbury, but I don't know if Guy Montag just likes to burn because it's fun, like that pyromaniac kind of sense of fun, or if this is an institutional thing that has been ingrained and forced upon his mind because he's doing a job and he has no choice in the matter. And he has contradictory feelings about this. And as he sees what others do, and again, I don't want to spoil it if you haven't read it, but as he sees things, he goes on and he thinks, maybe we shouldn't be burning books. What are in books that we need to burn them? It's so, so very powerful. So along with the fun, there is a heavy overlying, as I say, kind of sense, to that. Let's see. What I'm going to do now is all right. I'm going to get into character creation, and I'm going to start with a part of an opening. The art of character creation, I feel, is also best left to an organic process, but I think there's two aspects to it. Forming characters you can relate to. That's an important aspect. You need to be able to relate to the characters in your story. You can do that with empathy. You don't have to have been a fireman burning books. Please, I hope not. But this is very important because, as Vonnegut alluded to, when you can relate to your characters, the reader can relate to your characters. It's as simple as that. But it's so very important because I can get enamored with sometimes the language of things, enamored with what I'm trying to do. I have a point I'm trying to tell or something, and sometimes I'm just heavy-handed about it, and I drive myself nuts writing, just trying to be too overbearing with that, and I'm forgetting just form characters you can relate to. Very vital. Number two, highlighting your characters' differences and or their interests. This, I think, goes back to that, make it thrilling and exciting from the first line and from that opening if you can. I think this adds to that, very much so. The Stephen King line, you have the man in black. I mean, really, that could kind of be anything, but he's in a desert, he's running, and he's running from someone. He's running from a gunslinger. Well, it doesn't sound good if someone's being pursued by a gunslinger. It sounds like he's slinging guns. These characters are obviously different. The gunslinger has an interest in finding that man in black, and it's got a very good reason for it as well. And that's further elaborated on, but highlight those characters' differences. Now I'm going to, oh man, oh, here we go. All right, I have one here. I forgot to put this on my screen share, but it's fine because I'm at my desk, and at my desk I have all these fun tools. So in the materials that you've either gotten already, or there's a couple of things that I wanted to be sent to you after this workshop, there are some useful tools that I have that I think you may be able to use, and I hope you enjoy them. This is a character chart. Oh man, I'm really, I apologize. I had a shot of this to put on the screen, and I don't know what I did with it, but it's very simple. On it, this is my first creative writing professor when I was a freshman, gave this to me, and again, it forever changed my life and made things infinitely easier for my storytelling. It's a list of characteristics of any and all of the characters. Whenever I write a work now, if that work is 2 pages or it is 200 or 2,000 pages, I take a clipboard and I make a little dossier, and I just have 1 page per character. Any character that is important enough to use a page is probably going to have enough characteristics that they're going to resonate with the reader. What's on this list, which again, I apologize, I don't have it up there, but but it's just things like name, age, place of birth, citizenship, height, weight. But now this is because this was made by Ed Stever. Ed Stever was a poet laureate. What a brilliant man. I love this man, and I can't wait to tell him that I was talking about him in this here. He made this his own because he had learned this from someone. Absolutely brilliant guy. He was a brilliant actor, playwright, poet, fantastic voice actor, and his fiction was actually absolutely superb. He has things like unusual facial and body features, medical conditions, bathing habits, sleep patterns, favorite clothes, driving habits, obsession, public or private, goal, publicly pronounced, virtues, secret passion, main frustration and obstacle. Now, whenever I do this, because I can never just go along with the rules, that's part of my warped nature, I wind up crossing some of these out that I find don't apply or are not important, and I write it my own. But I keep it to a line for each. I might fill in the marginalia too, but I keep it to a page almost always. I broke that rule once in the last 25 years that I've, 20 years that I've been writing with this. I've broken that rule once recently, and it was because, and I guess I could share this much at least, the character was Sherlock Holmes, and I was using research and putting him in a light as a neurodivergent and likely autistic person. I needed a few pages for him. He had a lot of idiosyncrasies. A lot of things that he said that only he says. Even in his day, they weren't normal things to be said. And you know, and with that said, I would also continue to encourage invent words. People get angry at me all the time. That's not a word, and I'm like, it wasn't a word when Shakespeare wrote it either, but it is now. I am not Shakespeare by any means, but which is always their argument too, kind of annoying. But make words, do things in ways that haven't been done on the page in that way. As long as the reader can understand it, it's all game. It's all game, and this is going to add so much intrigue and really a sense of wonder. Makes an enormous difference. My process for character creation can't be put better than the Stephen King analogy. Birth the characters yourself, then let them live their lives and walk around and do whatever they're going to do for their lives, and you're just along for the ride. That's all it is. That's all it is. I absolutely swear by this. Now, there are people that probably the majority that outline and very meticulously every part of the story, including the character is dictated beforehand, that's fine. You're going to make your life easier if you can do that. I can't kind of go by that way. I have to improvise. I don't exactly know why, but I have to. But that's the other. There's the Panzer plotter. Let's look at our time. That's the Panzer plotter methods that you'll hear authors speak to sometimes. You've probably heard yourselves. I am a pantser. I fly by the seat of my pants, right? But to me, there's something beautiful in, I have ideas of this character. I know some of their essence. I try to think about where they were born, how they grew up, how difficult that was. And then there's something beautiful in, they've now come to life and they're doing things I didn't expect, things I didn't intend. But I'm going with it because this is what the character would do. This is what the character would do. Stephen King is a prolific writer. Love him or hate him, he's a prolific writer, and he is one of the best creator of characters that you could come across. So even if you're not a big fan of his nonfiction or his fiction or whatever, his instructions on writing, which is a semi-autobiographical, semi-humorous and satirical account of his very interesting life, I highly recommend. But if you pick up a book of his, look at those characters, look at how they're created, and also know that at a time before computers, he would take notes, start typing, and he would rip up those pages and cover the living room floor and start rearranging those pages to see what aspects of the character or what sentences came first and move them around. It makes it difficult in ways, but you feel the essence of your character. You make this character and the character is making decisions, and there's nothing cooler than you think you know how your story is going to end. You've been telling your story with purpose and you think you know where it's going to go, and then you realize you've grown with this character and this character's grown, and they wouldn't go that way. It's going somewhere else. It's absolutely it's brilliant. It's a great feeling. Let's see.
Just a short 10-minute reminder before we jump to Q&A, RJ.
Thank you. Let me see. I want to hit on very briefly. I want to hit on metaphor and I want to hit on conflict. And we'll see what we can do. The conflict in literature is really boils down to 7 basic kind of deviations: human versus human, human versus society, human versus nature, human versus technology, human versus fate, or human versus self. Sometimes you write a story and it has a few of these elements. Usually one of them is the crux, though. It's really the character against themselves, or the character against themselves, and also fate is intervening. Human versus human, which would be something like 1984. Those are they're good kind of guidelines and guardrails to keep in mind. I have included some materials that I think will be helpful to you. Joseph Campbell I call him a philosopher. He studied mythology. He studied the world's myths from, the oldest myths that there are. And he then determined we have X amount of ways to tell a story. Now, what's so interesting is that what they call the hero's journey is exactly what Star Wars used in the original trilogy. George Lucas, you know, uh, uh, George Lucas used this, and Star Wars, in and of itself, in George Lucas's own words, is boiled down to three movies, three parts of a three-part play of drama. You introduce the characters, you get to know the characters, you put them in the worst pit that they could ever be thrown into, and The Empire Strikes Back. And then they have to get out of it and have learned something and gained and or lost things along the way. That's these are things that are kind of could be the spine of your story, right? As I've said many times, and I encourage you to not abide by the hero's journey and every there's every one of the 12 stages that are there. Do what you want to do. You can you can do far more getting past that. Metaphor is, I would argue, much more important and vital to achieving your voice, but also your aims. It's so very powerful that we can take things that have helped transform us in our lives or those that we love or have known in our lives, and we can put those transformations and those transformational events and characteristics into our stories. What do I mean by that exactly? Well, a book like V for Vendetta. V for Vendetta is a graphic novel, was a fantastically adapted movie. At one point, the protagonist, the young woman Evie, is imprisoned, and one of the first things they do, she has these long, lush locks, for the beginning of the movie, and they shave her head. Alan Moore was doing this to essentially free her mind. She becomes reborn, that phoenix from the ashes. When that head is shaved, all of the shackles and chains of the dystopic 1984-like world that she is living in and is imprisoned in are stripped away. And this is her first then start to heal, not to heal so much as to grow and as to see things beyond the dark and ominous, and to see things beyond in that case the bias of an unjust society, to imagine the possibilities of revolution, to imagine the possibilities of positive change. If you haven't read it, or if you have no interest in reading a graphic novel, that's the illustrated comic book, highly recommend at least watching the film. It is inspirational. In my mind, it should be in every English class, at age 12, everywhere in the world. There's another interesting part in there, and that is V is this weird character in a mask, and he's trying to convince the people to change, and he hacks into a system, gets his message out, and he speaks to the people of a fascist government, who should not be seeing him, right? And he says that the world is being poorly managed by these dictators, but they put them in charge. And he says they're not to blame. He understands they put them in charge for fear, but he speaks to them in the language of a boss over an employee. It's very interesting. He takes on the role as if he's the fascist leader in the 5 minutes of screen time he has. And he is disciplining the people, telling them, listen, this is the harsh truth. They were allowed to come in. The fascist leaders, we have to do something about this. So it's a it's a powerful metaphor in part because it also speaks to capitalism, and it speaks to sometimes we feel we have to work. We're not working to live, we're working to work. You know, we're living to work. Um, and Alan Moore was speaking to that, you know, as the boss here, talking about what is arguably a much bigger and more important thing, but that was the method that he did it. Now, one of my, you know, another powerful metaphor is from Chuck Palahniuk in Fight Club. Fight Club, if you are familiar with it, if you're not familiar with it, at least watch the movie trailer because you'll find it entertaining, I think. Um, Fight Club is incredible because it's often misinterpreted as this hyper masculine fight club where it's only men and they beat the hell out of each other, and this is their new way to get out their angst and to be happy in the world and to question things. And Chuck Palahniuk is a gay author, and this is just about the gay experience. This is a metaphor for the gay experience that he put as to there are men that are hiding their homosexuality and are denying it, and then there are other men that are homophobic and um, they're completely um, misusing anger and targeting people, and it's all about the experience that Chuck Palahniuk has gone through. And it's so very powerful because he rips apart in a couple hundred pages toxic masculinity, and it just you could forever look at that and say, no, this is you know, this is a horrible thing. He does this with metaphors in this brilliant entertaining psychological thriller where men are beating the hell out of each other with their bare hands. um all right, so I know we're at time. I want to take some questions. Um, and I apologize for you know, for the rambling and the shorter bits at the end on some of these subjects, but you know, maybe we'll get to speak again and elaborate on those sometime in the future.